All right, class, welcome to another session. Today, we have Sean LaRochelle with us to talk about his fandom, but also talk about two things really cool that he has done based around his fandom of Disney. One, during quarantine, he designed and built a roller coaster themed after or an homage to the Matterhorn roller coaster in Disneyland, which is in California. And so we'll spend time talking about that because it's amazing. And in my communication, when I reached out to Sean, I asked him, "Hey, can we talk about this?" And I told him, I teach a class called Being a Fan of Disney. And his response is being very gracious about the class. He said in his undergrad, he did a thesis on the feasibility of EPCOT as a working city. And so when he told me that, I immediately said, I've got to read this. Send it to me. He sent it to me. So that's what we're going to start this conversation about. So two extremely interesting things that Sean has done. So without further ado, I'll give it over to Sean. Sean, if you could let everybody know a brief history of how you became a fan of Disney and kind of what led you to um, what led you to the point of one writing a thesis about the feasibility of Epcot, and then designing and constructing a roller coaster based after the Matterhorn. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Cody, and hello, everybody. I'm really honored to be here. I love getting to talk about Disney, and I was just really thrilled when Cody reached out to me. So, thank you for allowing me to talk about something that I love. My name is Sean, and I grew up in California, pretty close to Disneyland. Disneyland, was a huge part of my life. It was kind of a tie between a Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Disneyland, and we would go to both. And when I was a child, there were always debates amongst the kids, like which park is better. Six Flags has the best roller coasters. Disneyland has the best themes. And I kind of took the latter position because to me, story and craft just was a more it was just something. It was something that was more impactful. It was greater. It was harder to do really well. And I grew up with. I have three younger siblings, and we would make mini Disneylands in the backyard out of sand, and our rides got more elaborate with wheelbarrows and whatnot. And I always wanted to work. I always wanted to work for the Disney company, but really kind of grew away from that as I grew older. And then I went to school to pursue my undergraduate in political science. I intended on going to law school, and I took one law class and realized I can't do this. This is just not for me. But I was already stuck, so was kind of lost, and I ended up going to Europe, and I spent some time. And I was living in these, just beautiful spaces that the Europeans have created in some of the older cities. And I was kind of confused because I was like, why is this so beautiful? And where I've come from is just so ugly. And I was like thinking always in the back of my head how like Disney spaces were just always so perfect, kind of like the spaces I was, inhabiting in Europe. And so, I came back and I was like, I think I want to try to pursue a career with Disney, and didn't really know where to do that. But I talked to my senior advisor, my thesis advisor, and I asked him if I could write on Disney. I was like, I'm a poli-sci guy. I can talk about cities and about the feasibility of that. And so I was allowed to do that, and I learned a lot about what Walt's intentions were. Not just making movies, not just making theme parks, but much more elaborate and involved than he gets credit for, I think. But yeah, that's kind of a short history of my journey right now, I'm studying architecture at Clemson, pursuing my master's, hoping to go into theme park design, but we've got a little bit of time between now and then. So
Well, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you for talking about that. And it's so, as I said, when I got the email from you and you said what your thesis was, um, it was just, it's such a fascinating topic. And it's a topic that it's a discussion people have had before.
mhm.
Is would this have worked? And obviously, most people see EPCOT for what it is today. And the first time I went was, I think, either 86 or 87. So it was the kind of first iteration of EPCOT, which was not the intention of Walter E. Disney himself, which we'll get into. But so I think most people, and it's changed a lot since then. So I think most people see what it is now,
Yeah.
and see it as a theme park.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went, what I saw it as was this educational classroom, where you would go and you would see these new ideas, and you would go to the World Showcase, and you would see what it's like to live in these different countries. And obviously, it's, some of them are like the World Showcase. You have to focus on specific areas. So, but I saw it as this classroom, and the intent, though, was for it to be a living and working city. What it turned into, what the Imagineers described it as, is a place for people to come and take the ideas away from EPCOT to take back to their communities. But that wasn't the original intent. So let's get into what the intent was. And specifically, let's get into what your thesis was. You talked about kind of why you wanted to write a thesis on it,
Yeah.
or on Disney. But what was the specific focus on EPCOT itself?
Right. Okay. So I think we should lay some groundwork as far as the history. So, going back to the, late 50s, early 60s, there was what is referred to as the urban crisis in America. And so I think that even today, we still are suffering from the urban crisis. And so, it was this idea that um, essentially as cities were developing, things were getting really spread out. Um, the communities that people were living in were just kind of dying. There was not this vibrant community life. You didn't feel like you belonged to a city. You had just sporadic neighborhoods. This ugliness pervade our cities. There's very poor urban planning, urban development. Basically none. There's this great book by James Kunstler, The Geography of Nowhere, that really goes into the details of just how bad it was. And so, enter Walt Disney. Here's this guy who, grew up in the film industry, really focused on perfecting the art of animation. And so, he was working within these two-dimensional scenes, and he would sit in the sweat box. They coined it the sweat box because his artists would sweat as they were like watching him, because painstakingly hours went into each frame, and he would critique every little thing. And if you actually go and watch Snow White, which kind of was his masterpiece, I think, every frame is just so ornate and so beautiful, and he was so anal about making it perfect. And that evolved into the theme parks, into Disneyland, in which he was able to bring that perfection of the two-dimensional spaces into this three-dimensional world. And, you paid the price of admission, you got in, and once you were inside, everything was perfect. You could control everything. Well, if you watch videos from when Disneyland was made, it's made in the middle of nowhere. Uh, Nothing was around, and so it was kind of a beautiful place. You had to drive there to get there. But if you go there now to Disneyland in Anaheim, you know, just random fast food restaurants and hotels and drugstores and just, I mean, it's just chaos. There's no planning to it. And so Walt, in his mind was like, I got to fix this. Like it's nice when people are in, but getting here is just such a drag, and it's just not beautiful. And so he conceived of building a city, and so it was kind of an antidote in his mind to the urban crisis that I mentioned at the outset. Um, and so the idea was that this city would be a place that um, everything would be controlled by him, similar to Disneyland, but everything would be like everything would be just planned out perfectly. So in the center was the commerce. As you kind of came out, so I should say it was like circular in nature. I mean, this is just his initial plan, but circular in nature. The center was commerce, and then as you kind of stepped out, you got to more public, like churches, recreation, sports, parks, and then cities. Um, anyway, so he had this idea to build this city, and unfortunately, he passed away before any of it came to fruition. The city was going to be in what we know today as Disney World, so he'd already purchased all of the property, and there were fairly detailed plans as far as what it was going to look like. However, nobody after Walt died really had the in my mind, like the big picture panache to be able to pull it together. Nobody was as convicted. If you listen to interviews of Imagineers or bigwigs at the time, they thought the company was going to fold. So the company kind of went through this own like mini crisis after Walt's death. So my thesis basically just asked the question, could this be done? If Walt had lived, or if he had named a successor that was as convicted, as ambitious as he was, could this have happened? Should it have happened? Like, is it something that can exist in the United States? But yeah, I'm open to if you have questions about it. There are a lot of really interesting things that have happened since. Like the Walt Disney Company actually did build a city in Florida, Celebration, which is kind of considered to be a failure, more or less. Yeah, I mean, whatever questions you have, I'd like to talk more about it.
Well, and with specific to Celebration, when they built that, they did something very interesting. I cannot remember who the deal was with, but they had a deal with like cable providers, Wi-Fi, where the people living there would get these services, but they kind of at, in order to get these services, people had to agree to kind of have their usage monitored and their viewership monitored, what they were doing online or how much Wi-Fi they were using. And the idea was that they could use this agreement and this new city to kind of lay the groundwork for better understanding how people consumed different things, for people's consumer behavior. And so it was really interesting. And yes, they did sell off Celebration, but now now there are people who live in the two cities that were created
Right. Yeah.
by Walt Disney or for Walt Disney World, so they could be part of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And it's so interesting that the people who live there, they're citizens of either Bay Lake or Lake Buena Vista, but how do they deal with things like voting rights? And so, and you got into that in the thesis as
Right.
well. So that's a common issue that faces communities. So how would it have been handled in EPCOT? And then how is it handled now in the two cities that are created, and kind of in the future, current and in the future, how's it handled with something like Golden Oak, where they just built the luxury community on Walt Disney World property?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about, the current state of celebration. So I can't really speak to that. You know, for EPCOT, for the original, they weren't going to have, citizens weren't going to have voting rights. You kind of rescinded that. Um, and you kind of just trusted that, you know, Disney was going to do things the right way. And I think that, I think that a lot of people would trust somebody like Disney. It's funny. It's somewhat like communist, but I actually think it's a bit more like a monarchy, um, where you're trusting in who you believe to be a good man or woman, and that they're going to take care of you.
Mhm.
So for Walt, there were a lot of issues that they worked through. They talked about, well, maybe you'd only come temporarily. Maybe you'd be a citizen for 2 years and then you'd move on,
Mhm.
or maybe only people who would work in the adjacent theme park, Disney World, would be able to live there. Um, I think that these are all really, really, valid suggestions and valid ideas. I think that the fact that you have the freedom to participate in something like this is kind of like true to our our understanding as like Americans. Like, you have the freedom to leave if you want, but if you decide to stay here, like, here are the rules. And
Mhm.
I think that Celebration now basically operates kind of like an HOA, and so
Mhm.
it's not that different from an HOA in the sense that there are guidelines that you have to follow, there are fees that you have to pay, and then you've got this board that's just making sure that everything gets taken care of. I think one of the bigger questions about, like, whether or not EPCOT would have worked, it has to do, like, it comes down to like community. Like, was it gonna be like a real authentic community, which is what I think Disney was really trying to go for.
Mhm.
And I think that that's much more predominant, like, in the conversation now, like, internationally. Like, we're as an international community asking questions like, okay, what spaces can we design that are going to create authentic
Mhm.
community, where you really care about your neighbor, and you can have this organic growth. At the very beginning, I was talking about how in Europe, I love all these European cities, and they grew very organically. Like, I remember there was this like pastry shop that was like in this basement of this building that you kind of everybody knew about it because it was so great, but like you had to like wiggle your way through the
Mhm.
staircase to get to it. I don't know that a place like I don't know if the Walt Disney Company today could do that, create such organic spaces, but it's very possible that they could. And I think that the Epcot was supposed to be an experiment, right? It's the
Mhm.
experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And so I think the better idea isn't so much like, will will Epcot be the perfect city. I think what it was supposed to be was a testing ground, kind of like
Mhm.
what you're describing Celebration to be. It's a testing ground to see what works and how can we bring the things that work into our real cities. Um, One of the things that really fascinates me is like public transportation. Um, I love the transportation at Walt Disney World, especially with like the monorail. They just got the SkyTrack, the trains, the boats. I mean, I'm not a fan of the buses, but hey, buses are good too. Um, I think that those ideas were incredible. Like if
Mhm.
you look at the way that Epcot is laid out, I mean, you can go and look at an animation and they show you how um, the uh, the people movers, you know, radiated out the spokes and the monorail went around, and the cars actually went under the city, which is actually an idea that was first attributed to Da Vinci. I mean, maybe someone thought of it before, but Leonardo da Vinci actually drew up a schematic where all the like the food carts and the trash and everything would go under the city away from, you know, people walking. So I think those ideas are like incredibly valuable, and it would be really interesting to see, you know, in a place like Epcot, like, hey, you know, we're dealing, I mean, even today, Disney World, it's a perfect testing ground. You know, you're able to transport, you know, tens of thousands of people every day very efficiently. And so I guess in conclusion, like as far as the Epcot thing goes, like I think that it's a great idea. I think that under Walt's guidance, like definitely, you know, there were possibilities for it to work. I don't know if the people at Disney have the conviction now to do that. I like with Celebration, you know, my understanding of the reason it kind of didn't work was because Disney kind of just like wiped their hands of it and let it go. So I mean, I've been there a couple times to Celebration. It's very beautiful, but it lacks that community that I was kind of trying to describe. And that was really like my thesis was about like um, you know, could could Waltz contrive, could he create a space that was so perfect that people would live together in harmony in this community, or was it basically a bad idea? And I think you know, I think there are arguments for both sides. Obviously, like the tyranny side of it, that's, you know, it's one thing to live under Walt Disney, it's another thing to live under Bob Iger. You know, it's like, I mean, who's to say which guy's better? But you have to, like, in the back of your head, think, you know, someday some guy's gonna come around and he's not gonna want what's best for you. You know, and I don't know. It's fascinating, and you know, I was very fortunate to be able to write about it and to study a little bit about it. I know a very small amount about it, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the transportation. And first, I'm glad you um, discussed what Epcot meant when it opened and when it was designed, because it was this experimental community. It was all to see if it would work, what wouldn't work. And people talk about how Walt Disney, the man, always wanted to quote plus everything. And this was this way to be able to do that. And for people who don't know, if you go to Walt Disney World and you go to the Magic Kingdom and you ride the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover, which is during this time is not open, but you ride past the panorama of what Progress City was going to be, and it's this immense, just amazing display of what this was supposed to be. And every idea, the people mover itself was an idea to move people around the city in the kind of the central location of the city. The idea of the monorail, which had been designed at Disneyland and expanded at Walt Disney World to see if it could travel further distances, was going to be used to take people in and out of the city. And the idea of the monorail also was these were all things that were not just happening in a vacuum or within the company. The company was actually designing these things, these products for mass consumption. For instance, the Walt Disney Company designed the monorail with the intent to sell that to other cities to help with urban transportation. And I grew up in about an hour outside of Houston, Texas, and we used to go to the airport and just we would ride around on their monorail system. And that was kind of what we did. That was, like the
Great.
fun thing to do. My mom would take us and we would just ride around for a couple hours because it was so neat and like it was, unique to us. And recently I found out that was the only working monorail that the Walt Disney Company or the subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company that they sold. That was produced, designed and produced by that subsidiary company. And so these weren't just things that were happening in theory. They weren't just things that were happening in this experimental community. They were really, the intent was to take that out into the real world to help people.
Yeah, Walt was a visionary, and I think that that's something that is really just forgotten, or it's not really talked about all that often. Was that, Walt's trajectory, Walt's vision was so beyond theme parks. Like, who knows when he had this idea? I assume he didn't have it when he was making Snow White, but I definitely think that by the time Disneyland was built, he had this thought of like, wow, like I can really help people, and
Mhm.
the people that were coming into his parks and just the joy that he was, you know, bringing to people. I think that that was contagious and that he recognized that and he really wanted to help people. And so, yeah, like with the monorail, when the Imagineers were first developing it, they probably weren't really thinking, oh, like we're gonna maybe help Chicago with their transportation, we're gonna you know but I definitely think that that was Walt's vision.
Mhm.
And when you look at the People Mover, which the People Mover was also at Disneyland, same thing. It was like this was being developed on a smaller scale, to actually work inside these cities. And so, um, yeah, to underestimate the vision that Walt had, I think it's just kind of a sad thing that we just associate him with the theme parks,
Mhm.
when his vision for the company was going to affect a lot more
Yeah.
people in a very positive way.
Well, and it's attributed in one of the books about him, where he has a conversation about he doesn't want his legacy to only be the entertainment or to
Right.
only be the animated films. He wants his legacy to be something that helps the public. And I mean, you look at when Disneyland was open, and it wasn't there when it was open, but you look at like the House of the Future, and obviously the partnership with Monsanto, and there's some negatives and positives there as well because of the association. But the this House of the Future was there for people to walk through, and it was this idea of here's what to expect. And on that same token, Carousel of Progress was the same thing. Now it was built for the World's Fair, and with a with the funding from General Electric. So it was obviously there for commercial reasons to promote GE products, but it was this idea of how a family would live in different eras. And so he was a visionary on those types of things, how to help other people, or as people like to say, how to plus something that he
Right.
touches.
Right.
So anything else before we move on? And we're only moving on because if we kept going, this would be a 4-hour interview, and I'm not. I don't want
I,
to take up that much of your time. But anything else you want to say about the thesis, about EPCOT, the feasibility,
I
anything?
yeah, I would just say that, one of the reasons that I think that somebody like Walt was so successful, and that something like Epcot could have been feasible under him, was that he really was, in my mind, like the virtuous man. Like, Aristotle talks about virtue being the mean between extremes, and Walt always talked about having one foot in the past and one foot in the future. And you needed to be firmly planted in both, because if you keep both feet in the past, you're destined to, fall into corruption. You're going to fall behind. You're going to, take on really, you know, evil, habits. And if you're both feet in the future, you forget about where you came from and the lessons that you learned. And so I would just say that, it's really important when we think about, somebody like Disney who was so effective. Like, he really walked this tightrope between the two extremes. And yeah, that's kind of where I would leave it with that. Just when you read about Disney, he wasn't just a progressive. He also cared very much about like our history and where we came from.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great wrap up to that. I think you said it very, very well, and it leads into this next portion, which people by now have probably seen, or in the class will they have access to the video of what you did to pay homage to a very famous ride at Disneyland. So I don't talk about it as much. Why don't you tell us what you did
Okay.
and why you did, how you got there, why you did that?
Okay. So back in March of 2020, we were living with my parents, and we were kind of in quarantine because of COVID. And so, sitting around with nothing to do, and this video popped up, and it was this family that did their version of Pirates of the Caribbean in their living room. Mm-hmm. And it really inspired me, and it got me thinking, like, with the busyness of life, you're just so glued to your phone and meetings and work and school or whatever, you forget about like what you care about and, what you want to do. And, I'd had 2 weeks of just doing nothing. And I was like, hold up, like, since I was a kid, like I love Disney, and I always wanted to create a Disney ride. I've got all this free time. Why don't we make a Disney ride? And whatever we did, I wanted it to be really authentic. There's this guy I really like, and he has these rules, and one of them is pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And so whatever I did, I wanted it to just be true to whatever the form is that I was trying to follow. And so my brother Michael, we kind of share. We're born from the same cloth. And I told him, we're going to build a roller coaster. And he's like, great, which one? And I said, the Matterhorn. And he's like, why? And I was like, well, it's one of, the original rides. It's iconic. People will recognize it. And it has the fewest amount of animatronics. In fact, we weren't even planning on doing animatronics in the very beginning. Anyway, so it was kind of born from that. We started drawing up plans. I was in construction. I worked project management, so I had a fairly good sense of reading plans. I'm in graduate school for architecture now, so I hadn't done plans really before, but I knew enough. And my brother is a cabinet maker, but he does welding, and so he was able to figure out the track and the ride system. And for me, it was more about like the big picture and trying to tell a story. And it started off as just a family project. We'd go out every day after work, or sometimes before work, pretty much the entire weekend. We created a underbelly of the mountain out of wood, a frame for the mountain, if you will, and then put this pipe. First, we did it out of PVC pipe all the way through, and we tested probably 10 different carts before we got a cart that actually worked. And then we're like, we actually have to ride this thing. I don't feel comfortable with the plastic pipe. So my brother and I, we had this like executive decision. We're going to rip it out. We're going to replace it with steel. And I had never worked with steel. My brother had, so he taught me how to weld. And anyway, we made this track. It's about 400 feet long. The ride itself lasts about 60 seconds. Anyway, once we had the track built, we started doing all the mountain work. And I tell you what, like, I have such an appreciation for Imagineers. Like, the dedication is just incredible, because, you know, you start something like this and you're like, I got to finish it. I got to finish it. And I almost gave up. My wife was like, no, you got to finish. And it took us 2 months to do all the rock work, because, you know, we mixed it all by hand and we would apply it by hand. I ended up asking friends, you know, hey, come on out. We can social distance. You have your 20-foot patch. I'll have my 20-foot patch. And everybody wanted to help out. You know, I think everybody was so tired and sick of just being alone. And yeah, and then halfway through the project, we decided, you know, we should make an animatronic. So I had a friend who dabbles in robotics, and so he agreed to climb aboard, and you know, he helped me. I sent the Yeti to Texas, all the parts, and some friends of mine in Texas, they detailed him out, painted him, put plaque in his teeth. You know, we were all just really trying to capture all the details that, you know, Imagineers would think of. And, you know, at the end of the day, it was really about like trying to pay homage to Walt and to, you know, his spirit of like making something that was so authentic and would tell a story. And so, you know, the story for us was that, you know, you're in the Alps and you're really excited. And we had an original composition composed for the ride. And so you hear these flutes as you're going up, and the anticipation grows, and then you reach the top of the ride, and it's like you hear the Yeti roar, and it's shaking the mountain. It's so loud. And then you're off and you dive under the waterfall, and you're like have an adrenaline rush, because, you know, you're on a roller coaster and you're in a backyard and you're like, what's happening? But you don't have time to think about it, because you drop into the Yeti's cave and he's standing over you and you duck under his hand. And I mean, he's fully animatronic and he's about 6.5 feet tall. And so, I mean, it's terrifying. And you pop out and it's like final escape past the waterfall, under the bridge, back to the station. And so, you know, even though it's a really short ride, we felt like we were able to tell a really engaging story in, you know, a short 50 seconds. And yeah, so it's just led to a lot of really great things. You know, we started it off as this project. I wanted to bring, you know, some Disney to my family, and we were able to share it with, you know, my friends and you know, some other family members. And we posted it, we contacted the local news, because we thought, hey, this is a feel good story for Napa. And it kind of just went crazy. I think that, you know, with Disneyland, it's still closed right now when we're talking. You know, people are looking for some inspiration and help, just like I was inspired by the family that did Pirates in their living room. You know, I'm hoping it seems like other people have been inspired, which just makes me feel really good. And I know my family is just like ecstatic. And we were speaking offline earlier. I had the most amazing thing happen, was that the Imagineer who actually designed and built the original Matterhorn, he looked me up and he called me, and his name is Bob Gurr. If you don't know him, look him up. He's just an incredible human being, just so warm and joyful. He's 89 years old. He still rides a bike. He's like he told me he flies planes, virtual reality, every day to keep his mind sharp. But he spent an hour on the phone with me, just talking about all the trials that they went through, and, you know, how crazy Walt was, but how everybody just had such faith in him because he had such a good batting average. He was like, you just knew you couldn't fail. You know, I think he was like 24 years old, he told me, when Walt walked into his office and said, I want you to build a Matterhorn. And it's going to be a steel tube track that snakes its way with another track down this mountain. And at that point, nothing like that had ever been built, ever. And he was 24. I'm 28. I was terrified building my mountain. I can't imagine building this ride that, you know, is you can see from the freeway. And so I asked him, like, were you terrified? He's like, no, I knew it was going to work because Walt believed in us. And I think that, like, that is an amazing message right there. Like, what you can do when somebody believes in you,
Mm-hmm.
It tells you you can do this. But just FYI, Bob Gurr is not an engineer. He didn't go to school for it. He didn't even go to college. Like, he just figured it out. And he was telling me, yeah, I taught myself trig. I had a book, and we figured it out. And I don't know. I think I think just kind of segueing a little bit, that to me is kind of like, that's like Disney.
Mm-hmm.
It's this visual, visceral thing that you can physically go to, and it's a tribute, it's a monument to the fact that we as human beings are capable of doing something great. We're capable of creating spaces that are timeless and that tell stories and touch the hearts of millions of people. And you don't need to be a Disney Imagineer to do that. I think within all of us is this desire to create. And some of us create roller coasters, some of us create homes, some of us create paintings or other works of art. Some of us just want to have a family. But I think within all of us is that desire to create. And if we have people that believe in us, whether that's family members or friends or professors, like, you can do whatever you set out to achieve, if you work together and believe in yourself and work with other people. So
Well, and you you said that beautifully. There's so much in there that you summed it up so beautifully by bringing it back to somebody believing in you, and here's what you can do. Somebody believes in you, you believe in yourself. You really can do really great things, and you can have a lot of fun doing it. For the students and people listening, that um, the students in the class watch the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. So I believe it's episode 1. When you watch episode 1, you see Bob Gurr gives a tour of the Matterhorn and kind of the inside of the Matterhorn, and talks about some of the even urban legends with Matterhorn, and talks about having to figure all of this out. So students and people listening, when you watch that, that is the person who was kind enough to give Sean a call and give his time to share something that he did. And I something else that I think is really, really neat about all of this is, you said it started as a way for you and your family to kind of connect.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were able to share it with friends, and you were able to share it with extended families and other families. And now literally you've shared it with people around the world, because people around the world are watching this and are inspired by it and have so much fun watching it. Can, off the top of your head, do you know about how many people helped work on this?
Yeah, so we had a team of about 30 people. And when I talk about believing in yourself and believing in other people, I got to work with just some really incredible and talented people that I didn't even know what they were capable of. Like I say, I had friends in Texas working on some aspects of this. I had friends all in the northern Bay Area of California working on this. I got to witness just what happens when a group of diverse people come together and just hash things out and gel. And it really taught me, like, I talked about this in another interview, but it's really easy for me to sit here and have this conversation like I'm the one who built this mountain, but I was just such a small cog in the wheel. I came up with the idea, but if one other person hadn't helped, it would not look the way that it did. That rock work, for instance, I think the rock work is the perfect example, because I think almost everybody who helped with other things, whether it be music or robotics or the track or whatever, everybody helped with the rock work because it just took so long. And
That was the entryway in.
Yeah,
Everybody helps with the rock work. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it became this like quilt work.
Yeah.
And you think about like what we see in nature and just how there's this diversity in nature based on like where things are located or whatever. And I mean, that's what that mountain is like to me. Like when I look at it and I just see the different veins or formations or, you know, different texturing techniques, it's like you see the diversity of this thing. And uh you know, if we segue back to the Walt Disney Company, I mean, that was basically Walt's
Hmm.
genius, right? Walt's genius was that he would handpick these people that had no experience in that thing, and he'd be like, "I want to see what you do,"
Hmm.
you know. And I think what the analogy is, it's like when you look at a diamond and you look at it from one perspective, and you're like, "Wow, this is really beautiful," and then you turn the diamond around, and it's completely different, right? It's like that to me is like when you pull everybody together, as many people into the circle as possible, and you create, you know, whatever your diamond is, you know, and you turn it around and you're just like this is beautiful, you know. And you cannot do it by yourself.
Yeah.
like like you need to be confident in yourself, but you have to have the humility to say that it wasn't just me, you know. I i i can't thank my friends enough for how they helped me. And they too now is like are asking me like, hey, we should work on this project, we should work on this project. So it's like, you know, you do one thing and you inspire people, and then pretty soon like everybody wants to do their own thing. And I don't know, that's incredible. Like
Yeah.
to me that's again, going back to creativity, it's like we all want to create something,
Hmm.
you know, and I think we should be supportive of that mission, of that goal, of that instinct.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about imagination, I've written about imagination and trying to use imagination in from an academic perspective, trying to use imagination in the way that you solve problems and the way that you look at different things, and creativity being kind of the output, the what people can physically see and touch of imagination. I mean, it is such a creative project, and you said it so well that um, how many people it took to work on this, and everybody has their role. And there's a story that is told about Walt Disney where, you know, a kid asked him what he does. Does he draw? No. Does he do the animation? No. Does he do the voices anymore? No. And he kind of summed it up saying he's a bee, that he goes around and he gets a little pollen from here and takes it over here and takes ideas from and kind of spreads them around. And like you said, he would strategically pick people to put them together and say, go create, break some eggs, see
Yeah.
what happens. And it is so fantastic to see, and to see what you and your friends and your family did is truly inspiring. That what what do you think? The last thing before we kind of transition into our last section, how does it make you feel to know that people around the country, around the world, are enjoying this? How does that make you feel to know that is happening?
I mean, it's really overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to I don't know, to sit back and think about, you know, we had this idea, and you know, it took us 4 months working every day to make it come true. And um, we love it, but the fact that it's like universal, almost like we tapped into something that so many people are enjoying, like I mean, it's just like this flood of like joy. And it makes me want to go out and do more, you know. And it makes me really want to like collaborate more. And I don't know, I'm kind of getting a little emotional right now because we live in such a we live in such like a negative time where like There's so much negativity just everywhere, and everybody's just trying to tear each other down. And I know that the world isn't perfect and there are injustices everywhere, but I don't know. I want to create. I want to work with people. I want to make beautiful stuff. You know, and so much in our lives, like you can just feel like everybody is negative. And when you see this positive outpouring of love and joy from something that you created, you're inspired because you're like, the world is a great place and there are great people, and you just want to keep doing it. And so what I've taken from this is like, forget the negativity, leave that at the door. Like, we're just going to push forward. And like, I don't know if it's going to be theme parks. I don't know if it's going to be rides, but like, I want to keep creating. I want to keep collaborating with people. I want to keep meeting people. I want to keep having conversations like this. And I want to make the world a better place.
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful. And since you shared, I'll briefly share what I get from these conversations and from this class, and being able to talk to everyone that I've been able to talk to who's a fan of Disney is, and you touched on it, the it's the common it's a common interest. You ask someone if they're a fan of Disney, and if they are, they don't want to stop talking about it. And all of a sudden, you have two people talking, three people, four people, six, eight, and it's just exponential from there. That you have people right now who we we have been taught in certain ways, we're being reinforced in certain ways to separate into groups, and that it's human nature. That's a lot of what I write about, is how we separate into different groups. But for me, what has been really fun and beautiful in teaching this class and reading about Disney and interacting with people in the Disney space is those differences exist. You in different teams, different ideologies, different groups that people may be members of. But when it comes to this is something that people hold, the vast majority of people I've interacted with, at least, they hold in such high esteem that it is positive. Um, there's not near as many negative stories of people having negative interactions with other fans of Disney, as there are the positive ones. And I think that's what you touched on as well. That doing this has kind of brought you, and seeing how people react to it has brought that joy. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So you are right now working on your master's in architecture. Um, what do you see the future path for you? I mean, you've done this amazing project. You have um, an amazing portfolio in this project. What do you see as your future?
I, you know, I'm old enough to know that life doesn't happen exactly like you plan it out to be. Um, right now, where I'm at right now is part of kind of a 5-year plan that I put together to hopefully actually go work for the Walt Disney Company. I'd love to do Imagineering with them. Um, I'd love to help create some of these timeless experiences that so many of us get to share in. Um, you know, this project that I did was, a hobby that I did, in my non-working hours, and my wife was so gracious to let me do that. Um, but it would be great to do that for work. Um, my goal of being where I'm at right now with architecture is that I want to be the best version of myself. Um, so I don't want to just be somebody who pretends to know architecture. I want to be somebody who knows architecture, that knows how to design a space, has the skills to draw, has the language to communicate with the other designers and engineers. So, right now I'm dedicated 100% to becoming the best architect that I can become. Um, I was contacted by some Imagineers, kind of, um, just reaching out to me and letting me know that they saw the project and they wish me luck in the next 3 years. And so, I'm hoping that the industry is in a good place. Maybe I'll get an internship in the summers. Clemson has a really good relationship with Disney, so I'm hoping to be able to capitalize on that. Um, but at the end of the day, like I want to be a good person. I want to live a virtuous life. I want to bring joy to the world. I have a beautiful family. I have my wife and I have 3 kids, and my role first is to them, as a dad and as a husband. And I whatever I do, I want to be the best version of myself. And I would say that, to everybody, like, don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Be the best version of yourself. If you're not happy with who you are today, then change that tomorrow. And we can, every day we can move forward. And make sure you make friends with people who really want the best for you, because like I was saying with the collaboration, I got to work with just these amazing people, and I can guarantee you every single one of them wanted the project to succeed because they cared about me. None of us cared about a video that would go around the world. We wanted to work together, and I'm sorry, I'm going on and on. Like you said, these conversations
That's amazing.
these
Please.
conversations can go on forever. But bottom line is, like, I want to be the best I can be, and I encourage everybody else to do the same.
Well, that's a great message. It's a beautiful message. You have done a really, really cool thing, and people now are able to share in that excitement and share in that inspiration. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting it out there where I can see it, where others can see it. It is amazing.
Thank you. And thanks for letting me come on and be able to kind of go in depth more into it. I really enjoy these more casual conversation like discussions. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's as I said, that's been the neatest part of all of this for me, is being able to have these conversations and people being gracious enough to share their time and their experiences. The last thing that I like to do, I have some rapid fire questions. You can explain if you want. You can explain as much as you want. You don't have to explain at all. But these are kind of things that off the top of your head. So you grew up in California. Favorite, but you've I know have been to Walt Disney World as well. What is your favorite resort? And by that I mean California, Walt Disney World, any of the international resorts.
Okay, so favorite resort. It'll be Walt Disney World, and the only reason I say that is because before I actually worked at Walt Disney World, I'd never really been there, and I'd never really understood the resort life. And I got to stay at one of the resorts, and I got to, like, kind of relax, because I don't know about you, but when I grew up doing Disney, it was like you went and you did all the rides as fast as you could, and then you left. And the resort atmosphere is kind of like, oh, I'm here for a while. I can relax. And so I think that Walt Disney World does a really good job of just, like, slowing down the pace and, like, hey, you're here, enjoy your time. That doesn't mean it's my favorite park.
Yeah. Well, and quickly, I also want to mention that you, to bring it back to what you were talking about originally with EPCOT, is you reminded me, because of your experience in interning with the company, you sort of saw this experimental aspect of all of this. If you want to touch on that briefly.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to bring it up before. So the day after graduation, I ended up flying into Orlando, and I participated in an internship for the Walt Disney Company. And you know, it was right after I wrote my thesis, and it was crazy because I was actually living on Disney property and Disney built apartments and using Disney transportation and then working in the park. And so I actually got to kind of live out the experience a little bit. You know, that there were aspects of it that were really, really tough. You know, working, you know, front lines of a theme park is no joke. I always be nice to cast members because their job is not easy. But one of my managers in my exit interview, he told me, you know, when you leave, I know there are things that we did wrong, but you know, you're gonna see that there are a lot of things we did right. And you know, that was very prophetic because you know, I've since worked at, you know, multiple different companies, and Disney does a lot of things right. For one, they train you so well. Like, you know your job inside and outside. Like, there's no excuse. Like, you have so much confidence. Going back to like having someone believe in you. Like, you know this company believes in you just by the amount of time and money they spend training you to do a job. I would say, like, as far as like feeling like a community, like you feel like you're part of the Disney community. You know, they have all these like extra things for cast members to do. Like, I got to go underneath the Magic Kingdom in the tunnels. I got to go into the brain, which is where all the controls are, so they can open windows and do all sorts of stuff in there. It's super cool. I got to go behind the scenes of some parades, and I mean, you feel like you're kind of a family there.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do an excellent job with that. The transportation, they needed to work on a little bit, but anyway, it was a great experience, and you know, I wouldn't mind going back and working for them again. I should tell you, actually, I really lucked out. I got a pretty cool job. If you ever go, and maybe you've done this, but if you go to Disney World, you have to do a firework cruise. I don't know if you've done that before. But
I haven't.
Okay, so they have them at Bay Lake, and then they have them at I can't remember what the name of the one at EPCOT is, but they have one at EPCOT too. Anyway, so my job was I was a firework cruise driver.
Okay.
So I got my boating license, and I would take out family, you know, up to 10 people, and we would do a tour of, you know, the lakes. We'd watch, you know, I tell them about, you know, the different resorts, and you know, there are a lot of Easter eggs out there. And then we would park ourselves on the water just outside the entrance to Magic Kingdom, and the music would pipe in and we'd watch the fireworks. So I had like the coolest job of all time, because I just got to drive a boat and watch fireworks every night. It was amazing. But anyway, yeah, so that was a great experience. I encourage anybody who, you know, if you're an undergrad, look into the program. It's the Disney College program. They have opportunities for professional internships if you're in, you know, pursuing your master's, or, you know, if you've just graduated. And so that's more like corporate stuff. But if you want to work your way up the ladder, it's a great opportunity. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so you mentioned favorite resort being Walt Disney World. You gave the caveat, not necessarily your favorite park. So what is your favorite park?
My favorite park is Disneyland. It has to
Okay.
be. I mean, the level of detail in Disneyland is unrivaled. I think the most beautiful. I've been to 3 resorts. I've been to Paris, I've been to Disneyland, and I've been to Walt Disney World. I think Paris is arguably more beautiful, but there's just so much packed into Disneyland, the nostalgia. The Pirates of the Caribbean there is infinitely better than the one at Walt Disney World, and Pirates is my favorite ride. I think the best park is probably Animal Kingdom. I have all these caveats. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
My favorite is Disneyland. The most beautiful is Disneyland Paris, and the best is Animal Kingdom. That's what I think.
Okay. And you know, I have not been fortunate enough to go to Disneyland yet. We were supposed to go this last May for a conference, and then, you know, everything happened. But yeah, that's, you know, to walk in the park where Walt walked would be fantastic, and go on. I want to go for an extended period of time where I can go to the studios and I can go to some of the subsidiaries and I could see different things and kind of see more of the history. It would be fantastic. So then all the parks you've been to, well, I guess you just mentioned it. Your favorite ride being um, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep, Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland.
Yeah. So then next, favorite restaurant on any of the properties that you've been on?
Favorite restaurant is Boma, which is at Animal Kingdom Lodge. I love that. I love the atmosphere there. The food is spectacular. It's all you can eat buffet. Actually, my wife and I stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge for our honeymoon, and so we have really special memories of just that. And every time we as a family go to Disney World, I think we've been there now. Since we've been married, we've been back maybe 4 times, and we always go to Boma. It's just our favorite.
Yeah. So when I go, I typically do fast service because smaller kids, and we're not at the point yet where we're doing a lot of sit down and you know. But one thing I do in the parks is I get my fill of treats. Favorite treat at a Disney park?
Oh man, I feel like because you can get it anywhere, it's the churros.
Okay.
I just love the churros. I'm a sucker for them. Pretty much every day I'm in a park, I have to get at least one churro.
Yeah. I was always the Mickey ice cream bar. It still am, but
Yep.
this last time we went was the first time I actually had a Dole Whip, and man, are they amazing!
They're pretty good, pretty darn good. We tried to recreate them during COVID, and it just wasn't quite as good. I don't know. We were missing some key ingredient.
Well, I remember seeing on social media. So I think it was Taco Bell had a drink that people said, "Hey, this is kind of close to it," and I remember getting it and thinking, "No, this is not close to." Yeah, but there are places that that sell Dole Whips outside of the parks as well. There are in select areas around the country, I know. So last rapid fire question. This could be a character in the parks. It could be from the movie. It could be from any of the subsidiary, any of the acquisitions. Favorite Disney character?
Oh man. Oh man. That's hard. Oh. I think that I'm gonna say it's Belle.
Okay.
Beauty and the Beast is probably my favorite Disney movie, and I find her character to be just incredibly inspiring, and her sacrifice to be just something that we should strive for. Just total self-sacrifice, and then courage, and then learning to love something that we shouldn't.
Yeah.
but maybe needs to.
Yeah. And she was part of, during that Renaissance, she was part of some of those first quote unquote princesses, or the female lead, the female role, to show that kind of the strength, and to show, like you said, her sacrifice, and to take control of her own story. And that was kind of a shift of where the company was going into. Now we see these very strong female roles that should be told and should be examples for everybody. So I really like that. I really like that answer. Last thing, if anybody is wanting to contact you, social media, whatever, what's the best way to get hold of you?
So probably email is the best way. I'm using The email is disneytecture@gmail.com. The word Disney and then Tecture is TECTURE@gmail.
Okay.
And if you reach out to me, I might not be right away, but I will get back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, Sean, as I said, thank you for doing this. Thank you for the Matterhorn. Thank you for thank you for the ride. Thank you for mentioning it again in your gracious response about the class. You're mentioning your thesis, so we go down this other path that we're able to
Yeah.
kind of combine the two things. Thank you. This was so much fun.
Well, I want to thanks because you were more than gracious and, you know, willing to read my thesis with all the grammatical errors. And I love talking about it. You know, I haven't been able to dive into it deep as of late, so this was just really wonderful to get to pull it out and read through it again. And thank you for I think this is quite a service that you're doing, offering this
Thank you.
class, because I think we need more joy. We need more fans of Disney out there, and having these discussions, I think it's just fantastic. Great
Well,
work.
thank you. Thank you very much for those kind words. And it was definitely my pleasure to read through the thesis and get in a conversation about that. Thank you very much, Sean.
No worries. Take care.
Bye.